The next portion is going to be our Facebook Live, which is very exciting. And actually, Hervé and Paula have been on Facebook Live in the last, so it's been kicked off, which is exciting. So we have people on. In addition to everyone in the room here today, I also want to extend a very warm welcome to everyone in Delaware and across the country joining us via Facebook. If you're joining us online, please make sure to post your questions to the comment section, and we will do our very best to address those during our panel discussion later today, along with questions from anyone else in the room. So I'm going to ask our panelists to come up now, our Q&A panelists, and come sit, and the mics are ready. And then we will begin taking, I ask each of you to introduce yourselves, please, before we begin. And then we will begin taking questions, and this should be very interesting.
Oh, this is you? So I'm here?
So we've done a very good job of asking people from the cancer communities throughout Delaware to sit on this panel, and from across the state, from different continuums. So Sean, yes. Why don't you kick it off and please tell everyone who you are and introduce yourself.
Sure. I am Sean Hebbel. I'm the program director of the Cancer Support Community. I have been since its inception 22 years ago. I'm an oncology social worker by profession and have been for 35 years, and I'm really excited to be here today.
Can you please use a mic when you speak?
I got level here.
Oh, well, we can't hear.
Did you turn it on?
I did.
There.
Oh. It's blinking on and off. Does that mean something good?
Christmas.
I don't know if it, no, it doesn't sound like it, does it? Of course I would get it better.
Do you want to use this one for now?
Yeah, might as well, yeah. Hi, I'm Sean Hebbel. Do you want to hear it again? I've been the program director for 22 years of the Cancer Support Community. I'm an oncology social worker. This has really been an exciting morning, and I'm looking forward to getting some questions from folks in the room, but also from folks on Facebook Live.
Hi, I'm Dr. Judith Ramirez. I am the manager of psychosocial services at BB's Tunnell Cancer Center. I've been working in oncology for the last 16 years.
Hi, Peter Langmuir. I'm responsible for clinical development of our oncology targeted therapies here at Incyte. Originally, I'm a pediatric hematologist oncologist. I've been in pharmaceutical industry for the last 16 years.
Hi, can you hear me? Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Mine's green now.
Oh. I'm Leonard. I'm a clinical health coach and clinical instructor at the University of Delaware in the Department of Behavioral Health and Nutrition, and also the clinical director of our Health Coaching Research and Training Center there at the university. I work with Mike.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Darcy Burbage. I'm an oncology nurse navigator at the Helen F. Graham Cancer Center and Research Institute. And Sean and I worked together for 30-some years. We started in kindergarten, if anybody's wondering. So we've been doing this forever, and it's my privilege to be here today. Thank you.
And I'm Michael Mackenzie. Again, I'm an assistant professor at the University of Delaware. I work in the area of cancer care. What else do I need to tell you? You had my intro before, director of the Mind Body Behavior Lab and academic director of our health coaching program. I'll also be serving as the moderator today. And we will be taking questions from the group as a whole. There's microphones going around, so if you could please wait for a microphone to come to you so that to speak so that everyone can hear our question, including everybody on Facebook Live. Thank you very much. Do we have any initial questions? Oh my goodness, great, thank you.
Hi, my name is Mike Nyman. I'm on the board of Cancer Support Community. I guess my question is for Peter, and not just Incyte, but the competitive environment in the space of coming out with new drugs. How do you balance the need for kind of global collaboration with the need to protect intellectual property from also the need to make money and make a profit so you can continue to bring these drugs to market?
So, I mean, we definitely have a mission to develop drugs globally to meet the needs of cancer patients around the world. It is obviously a competitive space. I mean, I think each of us is trying to certainly here at Incyte, follow the best science and develop drugs that from the beginning have a good hypothesis that are potentially going to bring benefit to cancer patients, and trying to do the trials that demonstrate that the best. So ultimately, it's going to rise or fall on the data that we're able to demonstrate from those trials and ultimately get it approved. But our goal is to try and get these drugs approved globally. You know, there's some competitiveness, but there's also a lot of collaboration as well. And we have a number of collaborative efforts with other companies. I mean, we've had collaborations with Roche, with AstraZeneca, with Merck, with Bristol Myers Squibb, and many others. So, yeah, yes, there is competition in the industry, but I think we're all on the same mission at the end of the day. And so I think there's a lot of collaboration as well, which ultimately will be beneficial to everyone.
Hi, this is kind of for everybody. We know we're not going to get any new drugs out or treatments out without clinical trials, right? And yet the level of enrollment in clinical trials is just critically low. Is anything being done to try and improve that? I say this with it's a part of my thesis I'm working on for my master's, but what's being done out there to help improve that, to help, I believe that would probably help speed up access to some of these drugs.
Darcy, would you like to speak to that?
Sure. Thanks for that question. And we're very fortunate in our community here in Delaware to have access to many different clinical trials. And we also have patients who participate, it's called the OPACT, and it's volunteers who are participants in clinical trials that can speak to other patients in regards to what their concerns are in enrollment. There's a lot of criteria to evaluate if you're eligible or not in order to participate in the clinical trials. So those are a few of the factors that we're involved in. And here also in Delaware, we're really lucky that there's many different clinical trials, not just through large organizations, but also pharmaceutical companies, other biotechnology companies like here in Incyte. So there's a lot of access to clinical trials. I know when you meet with your physician, if you're working on your thesis or other people in the room, ask them and say, am I eligible for a clinical trial? Ask every physician that you meet, not just your medical oncologist, if it's a surgeon, if it is the medical oncologist, radiation oncologist. Also, if you're a social worker or if you're going to the cancer support community, there's a lot of available, not just treatment trials, but other trials to look at how we can improve your quality of life as well.
Peter or Judith, anything that you'd like to add further?
I guess one other thing I'll add, I mean, I think there's one of the criticisms I think often of clinical trials is they have relatively restricted eligibility. So maybe a lot of patients who would like to participate aren't for one reason or another. I think there's a major effort, not only within individual companies, but more broadly within the cancer research community to try to look at that. And so just one example of this, there's an ongoing discussion between the NCI, the American Society of Clinical Oncology, a number of academic institutions, and industry partners as well, to look at some of the standard eligibility criteria we have in place and really to sort of challenge some of that and say, can we make the eligibility broader so more patients have access to clinical trials? But I think a lot of it also it comes back to education and really educating people on the value of clinical trials, not only what's available for them, but actually that there's benefit from participating in one.
Are people considering volunteering for a clinical trial tested for possible allergic reactions?
Generally, no. I think that, a lot of our clinical trials will say, if you're not eligible for it if you are allergic to one of the components, but generally we don't know, at least for the drug itself, whether you're allergic to that drug or not before you come onto the trial. There may be components sometimes particularly for intravenous drugs, if they're mixed with something in particular that people may know that whatever that solvent is, they may be allergic to that. But for the drug itself, we don't generally test. Now, having said that, allergic reactions to the medications themselves are actually quite rare. But the bigger problem is some of the other side effects that may be associated with that.
And sometimes, and just to tag along with that too, sometimes you don't even know if you're allergic to anything until you happen to get the medication, and you could have taken it several doses and then all of a sudden develop a reaction. So if you're in a clinical trial setting, or even if you're not, if you're getting medication, IV chemotherapy, usually monitored by nurses that are very well in tune to what's going on and can intervene immediately if you happen to have a reaction.
Other questions?
Just to stay on the subject of clinical trials for a moment, if there is a clinical trial that's already been approved by FDA for, let's say, one PD-1 inhibitor in combination with something for a particular class of patients, are there good reasons, or how do you as a company take that into account in developing clinical trials for another PD-L1 inhibitor? There's only a certain subset of patients that are going to be able to enroll in these things, and is that a waste of resources?
So it's a good question. I think so. There are two things we might look at. One might be if we think for some reason our drug is better in one way or another, either it may deliver better efficacy or maybe has a better side effect profile than what's currently being tested, then we might study the drug in exactly the same setting, but with the hope that we may actually show some benefit to our drug. If, on the other hand, we think the two drugs are reasonably similar, we may look for a different setting. So if one drug's being tested in lung cancer, we may test our drug in breast cancer or something like that. So there's not a sort of one-size-fits-all for that question, because we don't know until you test them whether the two drugs are really, how similar they are or not. Does that answer?
We do have a question from our Facebook Live audience. Dan would like to know what's being done to address the disparity of care for people with disabilities. It's up for grabs.
Yeah. What is?
I think that there's a lot being done to care for persons with disability, and I think that if you're a person with a disability and in treatment for cancer or are a cancer survivor, connecting with either a navigator or social worker at your local cancer center or with someone from the local cancer support community will help you determine and connect with resources that are available.
Thank you, Judith. Sean, in your role as a community provider, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think I was thinking as Judith was talking, we have really not had a whole lot of people with disabilities that have come to the cancer support community other than through their cancer, and I mean, we're geared up to that, so I don't know whether there would be any, anything else that I could add to that at this point. So,
right, and as Judith, we also, all the institutions in the state of Delaware are compliant with, the ADA, so there is, accessibility for patients who are identified with a disability, regardless if it's physical or emotional, or if you're looking at disparities. I'm not sure if the question had to do with language services as well, because there's a lot of, we have translators, we have a translator line, as I'm sure most institutions or facilities do. So there's people who are bilingual, regardless of what language you speak, that can help address those issues as well, so.
Other questions? Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Sean, I'll address this to you. Paula shared some statistics on psychosocial services and how they impact patients primarily with lifestyle issues. But I've also recently read a lot of articles where there's statistics that also show it has dramatic effects on treatment as well. Could you share some of that with us that you know?
What statistics, a dramatic effect on treatment in what way, Don?
For example, and I'm trying to remember the article, but it talked about laughter being sometimes as important as actually taking medication in terms of those kinds of things.
So things like dealing with the isolation that people have, dealing with the issues around hope, dealing with the control issues that people frequently have. Is that kind of what yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons that the cancer support community exists, of course, is to have groups of people to be able to talk about those things in a nice private setting so that they can hopefully get, on top of their cancer experience, partner with their healthcare team, and be able to live fully in spite of having cancer.
Yeah, I could probably contribute a little bit. So again, that research around psychosocial care and disease progression is relatively new. A lot of the initial work in that area was really around quality of life and other psychosocial outcomes, and things looking around disease morbidity and mortality is much newer and requires a much larger sample. So again, I don't know that a definitive study has been done yet. Are there some interesting things that are coming up in the research? I think absolutely. Is there a trend in the research yet? I don't know that we're there yet. But certainly we're seeing things where people that are having their psychosocial care taken care of, even in terms of treatment adherence, those things seem to be better taken care of. The challenge, though, that I think I would just emphasize for people that have had a cancer experience, that the flip side isn't also true. So having worked with people clinically before, and I think Sean can speak to this as well, where if I'd only been more happy, I wouldn't have got cancer, or if I'd only been more positive, I would have got cancer. And there's absolutely no data that shows any relation of that. And for the most part, we're just trying to help people optimize their treatment. There's a lot of other disease processes and other things that we need to think about in terms of the actual behaviors, and it's messy stuff. But the last thing we want somebody to do going into a cancer experience is thinking that somehow they've caused it based on their disposition. It's a really tough thing for somebody to do to themselves.
Yeah, hi. First, I want to commend Incyte for their assistance fund. I think it's great, and I'm on the board, and I know that we, as the program goes on, we're getting more and more requests. My question is, what other resources, because this is just one, that somebody can turn to for help?
There's many resources available in our community. So fortunately, through advocacy organizations, some disease-specific sites, also most institutions have financial assistance programs that can assist patients. There's other organizations, Delaware Breast Cancer Coalition, American Cancer Society with Road to Recovery. So there's a lot of resources that are available to help patients. And it's so fortunate that we have this fund to help pay for some living expenses. And even for people who are insured, it's that, those additional copays that Hervé had mentioned, and Paula as well, that it affects everyone. And as treatment becomes cancer becomes more chronic, these issues are going to continue to occur, not just medication copays, but if you need lymphedema treatment, if you need, those garments, if you need other ostomy bags. So there's a lot of resources that you can tap out with your insurance. So we're fortunate. So just a plug for the institutions, cancer support community, as well as the other advocacy organizations that are represented, is ask what's available. I need help. It's hard to ask for help. We all know that it is, but sometimes people call me and say, I don't even know what I don't know. And just to get things started and get the conversation rolling. So just, encourage people to ask questions.
Can I say one thing? Delaware Breast Cancer Coalition has an emergency cancer assistance fund. So, and it's in Kent County. So there are other funds in the state of Delaware.
We at Tunnell Cancer Center, we have a fund. And on a personal note, my sister was just recently diagnosed with a very aggressive breast cancer, and she lives up in Pennsylvania. I know resources in Delaware. I don't know resources up in Pennsylvania. So I went to the University of Google, and I looked at the array of financial support programs that are available nationally, made a phone call to the institution where she's being treated, spoke with the financial counselor and the social worker there, and said, hey, here's a list. Can you help me take care of this with my sister? And 100% working on all of those things. So the resources are out there, and I think to Darcy's point, it is very difficult for us to ask for help. But we need to.
So actually, Judith, this was a question that was asked at the break, and I think your example is really powerful. You as a person that works in this cancer world had the wherewithal to sort of make these calls and have these conversations. The question that was asked during the break was, for each of our health professionals, if there's one thing that you could tell a cancer survivor or their family member based on your role, what's the thing that you would share with them to do while they're undergoing treatment? Darcy, do you mind just starting and we'll work this way?
I think just it goes back to what I always said is ask for help. And even if you don't know the question to ask, just say, I don't even know what to ask. I was just diagnosed. Can you help me? And we can take it from there.
I think on our side is just to honor the fact that you're an expert in your health. Yep. I think oftentimes you get all this information, you're not quite sure what to do with all of it, and you have to really go back to how do you feel? And no one feels like you. So, and also just honoring that you're unique and that your experience is unique, where you fall, the way your role in your family and whatnot is unique, and that to hold on to that as you go through your experience and hold on to it tightly so that people hear you.
I'm still going to sound like a broken record. I mean, I think it's really just asking for help and asking for clarification. If you're seeing your doctor and something's not clear, don't leave the room until it's been explained to you, or find someone who will. And as everybody said earlier, go for a second opinion, get those sources of fight, get as much information as you can, and find the supports within your family, your community as well to help you.
I would say answer honestly when we ask, how are you? Mm-hmm. Check in with your mind, check in with your body, check in with your spirit. Let us know, let your provider know, let the nurse know, let whoever's asking you, how are you, what it is that you are and how you are.
And it's really the same that everybody else has been saying, communicate as best you can with the people who love you, with your healthcare providers. I mean, if you have a good line of communication with everybody, you're going to do the best.
Lots of questions. There we go. Thank you.
I just wanted to piggyback kind of on the support that was given to me. I'm a cancer survivor of 2 cancers, non-Hodgkin's, follicular lymphoma, and triple-negative breast. And during my journey, I did go to a couple of events that are at the Helen Cancer Center, and you were talking about laughter. They had a laughter yoga program, which was very enlightening. And, it kind of made light of the situation. You had a room full of all sorts of survivors. And it did get some people that were really, going through a difficult time to be able to kind of have something to laugh about. So I do think that's important. And then Delaware Breast Cancer Coalition, I was a proud winner of Pride Clean. They have an organization that helps you when you're going through your cancer diagnosis, that helps with coming to your house once a week and cleaning for you when you know you can't do it. And then the other was Seize It. I think this was a parent. I worked at a school, the Tunnell school, while I was going through my journey of cancer. And one of the parents came to me and, we've been promoting good health and keeping exercising. And one of the things they said was to me, what sort of sport have you always wanted to do? And they provide different avenues. They provided me with a bike that was given to me as a charity to help me just get out of the house and go biking. So my son would go biking with me. So
nice.
Thank you very much. So we have a question here. Sorry.
Yes, hi. I just wanted to say I work for the Delaware Breast Cancer Coalition, and I can't thank Incyte enough for your grant for our financial assistance. The sad stories that are out there just, break your heart. But to be able to help, with the financial assistance, there's so many high copays, high deductibles. It's unbelievable. So people really are struggling or thinking about not even going through with their treatment. But I have a question regarding research. So I know when companies do research and something works really well, it's right out there advertised. But if you go through a clinical trial or you go through research and the study doesn't, or the drug doesn't work, is that shared? Is there transparency, I guess, with other companies so this is not repeated through another company, say out in California, doing the same research that's already failed somewhere else?
It's definitely shared. There are actually obligations to publish results of clinical trials online within a certain amount of time after the trial is completed. And generally, we and other companies will actually publish it usually sooner than that. We'll have presentation, a meeting or something. That doesn't stop people from repeating it. Let's see if ours works, if we do it differently and then we get a different outcome. But no, there are obligations to publish. So all the research is published, whether it's positive or negative or ambivalent.
Yeah, I was going to also talk about some other kinds of services and supports that are out there that haven't been mentioned. So meeting with a survivors group can be really impactful, because these are people that have been through maybe what you're going through or what you've been through, and can help you kind of manage some of those things. I also found that speaking to with your church or your synagogue, having a relationship with many congregations have a nurse on their staff, and I found my pastor was extremely helpful for me. And so those are just some other things that might help.
Thank you.
Are you guys familiar with the federal oral parity bill, HR 1409, and what are you guys doing to try to make sure it gets passed federally?
I'm familiar with that, and actually through my professional organization, the Oncology Nursing Society, I've been to Washington on several occasions and met with our national representatives, Congresswoman Blunt Rochester, as well as Senator Coons and Carper's office in regard to that. So, and when Hervé put that up there, that was my first thought. Here we go. You know, we really need to address this issue. And what, if people aren't familiar with that, is if most medications, IV medications, are covered by your health insurance, where the oral medications are covered by your copay. And some of those copays are astronomical for pharmaceutical medication. So that's something that you can write to your United States Senator and Congressman, and I know Senator Coons will be here shortly, so, and he probably supports that, I'm sure he does, but certainly we have to keep those words out there and keep the conversation going.
Okay, I just want to follow up. Yeah, I'm on one of those medications, $2,000 a month copay, and thanks to Leukemia Lymphoma Society for helping
Foot that bill,
Yes.
$2,000 a month, and I did meet with Carper and Coons and told them, and those guys are clueless as to what we're paying out. So a suggestion to everyone is get involved, be your own advocate. I'm a multiple myeloma survivor, and you have to advocate for what we want.
Yeah.
And just don't sit back and take cancer, you gotta fight it. And you gotta fight at the federal level, because we shouldn't have to pay $2,000 a month to survive. And I've had to go without medications a couple months because I did not have the funds to pay for it at the time.
Thank you.
What's the name of the legislation again? It's the Federal Oral Parity Bill.
Federal Oral Parity Bill, HR 1409. Well, it allows, with chemotherapy, your health insurance will cover intravenous and injections 100%. If you're taking oral medications, such as I take Revlimid, it falls under your prescription drug plan, which is 20% copay for you, and the insurance company pays the 80%. If it's chemotherapy and they cover chemotherapy, it shouldn't matter the delivery system.
Yes, it's oral
Yeah.
parity. That's exactly what they're doing. And as more chemotherapy is being offered orally, it's going to happen more and more. So this really needs to be addressed sooner than later. Great.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Just want to maybe open another door, and I'm not quite sure how to phrase it. I've had two husbands with cancer. One passed away of bladder cancer, and I wish he had access to some of the drugs that are now available for bladder cancer. My current husband has had several years of dealing with vocal fold cancer. what I'm hearing you say is to a lot of patients, you go do this, but what about the support people and how to navigate dealing with a new diagnosis? With my first husband, I kind of had a lot of guilt feelings after he passed because people were saying, you should have been more positive, you should have prayed more, you should have gone to visits with him, you know, and that was very difficult to deal with. So I'm just wondering, how do your services expand to support people?
Well, I'll address that because the cancer support community does have caregiver support groups for the primary emotional caregiver. Every week, they typically coincide with the participant group. So folks who have cancer go in one room, folks with the caregivers go in the other room, and they all both have their same professionally facilitated support group. And you get to talk about whatever your fears are, your concerns are, and all of that stuff with your own support group as your husband might have had you chosen to come to us at that time. And I think that really might have helped in some case. And you can't, of course, control what other people are going to say, probably under the guise of being helpful, but I hear all the time in the support groups the very unhelpful things that people say, and unfortunately, a sense of humor subject to some of those.
Unfortunately, that is our last question as part of this. We thank everybody for joining us and for their questions.